The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, behind bars and deep in debt, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. checks in early to federal prison while his D.C. home goes up for sale.
Thick black dust is blanketing parts of Chicago's southeast side, outraging local residents. Why the EPA and state prosecutors are stepping in.
And we'll introduce you to a woman who is spending her retirement years in the kitchen, teaching kids the fine art of cooking. These stories and much more tonight on In the Loop.
I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight we take a closer look at a growing problem on Chicago's southeast side. Giant piles of refinery waste creating clouds of potentially dangerous dust.
It's called petroleum coke or pet coke, a byproduct of refineries converting Canadian tar sands into oil. Tons of it are piling up along the Calumet River, waiting to be shipped overseas.
Windy days make it tough to breathe in some places as wind whips the dust into dark black clouds and makes life miserable for neighbors.
Look at all that. And up here, oh hell.
55-year-old Peter Cerniak lives life with the windows closed, even covered in plastic, but the thick black dust still finds its way inside. His little house on Chicago's southeast side sits right across the street from the KCBX terminal, owned by Coke Carbon, and across the river from Beamster-Bore Slag, two companies storing massive piles of pet coke along the Calumet River. Most of it comes from BP's Whiting, Indiana refinery. From his front window, Peter watches the parade of trucks hauling in more every day.
A lot of trucks. 50, 100.
He wonders what this is doing to his health and already relies on oxygen to breathe. Peter has COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, the result of a lifetime working in steel mills and living near the site where coal was once stored and now pet coke.
Because I got to breathe this stuff every day. I mean, every day.
Maria Rosas and her family live next door. Their home is also covered with thick black soot, and she relies on a machine to help her breathe at night. Maria says her entire family suffers from asthma and allergies and blames the giant piles of pet coke nearby. When the wind blows, she says the sky turns black and thick with dust. Worried neighbors packed a town hall meeting last week.
Ladies and gentlemen, your human rights, your civil rights are being violated. And you better get angry.
Residents worry about exposure to what they describe as constant pollution.
I mean, that's like in the summertime. My kids couldn't go swimming. The pool was black.
Not only that, it was like literally on us too, on our skin, on our clothes. We can't even taste it.
Because I have a girl that's asthmatic, really high and asthmatic, and it's just getting her breathing is bad with all that dirt piling up. We can't even open the back windows.
Also at the meeting, 10th Ward Alderman John Pope, who represents the southeast side.
The only way you get action is to take formal action. Document it, call up, fill out the sheets. Let's try to get some of the legislation changed.
Alderman Pope says he's working with the Illinois Attorney General's office and the State Environmental Protection Agency, which this week cited Beamster-Bore Slag Company for violating air pollution limits in handling pet coke.
Folks are not that willing to put up with health problems and the dirt and grime and pollution around here as they once were.
Tom Shepard is with the Southeast Environmental Task Force. He says companies stockpiling pet coke have done little to control the dust, aside from occasionally spraying the piles with water. He and other area residents want the pet coke operations moved out of the neighborhood or contained in indoor storage areas. Beamster-Bore Slag Company did not respond to our request for comment. In a written statement, KCBX said they've handled pet coke at this location for more than 20 years, and they are in the final stages of constructing more than $10 million in upgrades, including improvements to the dust suppression capabilities. KCBX also said they put a priority on regulatory compliance and managing operations in a manner that protects the health and safety of the employees, the community, and the environment. But from his living room filled with black dust and the rattle of passing trucks bringing in more pet coke, Peter Cerniak is not convinced much will change.
If they're making tons of money, they could care less, in my opinion.
Joining us to talk more about the pet coke issue is Josh Mogerman, Chicago Deputy Director for the National Resources Defense Council. Hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, companies have been storing coal and pet coke on these sites for decades. What's so different now?
Well, the big black piles of stuff that was on the banks of the Calumet River for decades represented jobs in the past. It was coal that was used in the steel mills. If you go to the southeast side now, those mills are gone, and the people that relied on that coal for middle-class lifestyles are left with something new. It's petroleum coke, it's waste, it's leftover from refining of this very dirty oil, and all they're left with, instead of the jobs that came with the previous piles, is health problems and a blight on their community. It's a bad change.
Now, is there some sort of tacit understanding that a little pollution is okay if there are jobs involved, but if there are no jobs, this has become unacceptable?
Well, we don't think anyone should be tolerating this sort of pollution. That's not how we should be living today. However, that isn't the way the social contract worked back in a few decades ago. And certainly there was a recognition that this is an area that relied on some dirtiness to support an economy, but that economy's gone. So it's not, that bargain doesn't exist anymore.
Now, the EPA has not designated pet coke as hazardous waste. Is this a comfort or a concern?
Well, the big concern for the community is particulate matter, and that's these little tiny bits that get stuck in the air and then stuck in people's lungs. It causes respiratory problems, pulmonary problems. And, you know, we closed down the Fisk and Crawford coal plants in Chicago for this issue. So the fact that they don't say these particular piles are toxic doesn't eliminate the problem that the community is already burdened by.
Clearly, these people are breathing this in every day. We've seen pictures of those dust storms, which are really remarkable. What do we know about the dangers of pet coke, both to humans and to the environment?
Well, we know that it's a powdery substance that gets airborne very, very easily. I've been down in the area, and I have seen, every time I've been there have been clouds of the dust. I've gone on the river. I've seen the dust coating the surface of the river. These are significant environmental problems, and these are significant health problems that the public is right to be calling for a change.
Now, BP's Whiting, Indiana facility, where most of this comes from, is undergoing a massive upgrade, from what we understand, $3.8 billion to build one of the world's largest cokers to process some of this tar sands oil. What does that mean for what we're seeing on the Calumet now and what we could see in the years to come?
Well, the images that you saw in the piece are frightening, to see these big giant piles just appear in people's neighborhoods. But it's just the beginning of the problem. Once that refinery gets up and running and that coker starts spitting out 6,000 tons of pet coke every day, those piles are probably going to get a lot bigger. We're talking more than 2 million tons of pet coke coming out of that refinery every year, and it has to go somewhere. Right now, it looks like it's going to the southeast side.
Now, what type of permitting process do these facilities go through? We heard in the piece that the EPA just cited Beamster Bore, one of the storage companies, the smaller of the two, with air pollution violations. What does this mean for that site? What does it mean for residents in the area? And what type of permitting do people go through to get clearance to store this stuff?
One of the problems is that because pet coke can be used as a much dirtier coal alternative, it's not classified as a waste product. And so the standards are much less stringent. They have to deal with this issue of particulate matter. We think that they are exceeding their permits on that issue already. They have to deal with the impact that they have on the waterways nearby. They cannot just allow their product to be washed into the river. That also seems to be problematic, and we're looking into those issues right now. The biggest problem with all of this, though, is that these are private companies that are not very transparent. It's very difficult to see when this is coming in, where it's going, and how it's being handled. And until there's more clarity, it's going to be very difficult to really work out a solution that takes the needs of the neighborhood into heart.
Now, this has been a big problem in Detroit as well. There were piles of pet coke there. The mayor complained and ordered them removed, and they were taken out of Detroit. Is it curious on some level that we're seeing similar problems here, but we've yet to hear from Mayor Rahm Emanuel?
Well, we think that a solution to this is required from every level of government. Region 5 of the EPA sees this problem popping up all over the place. They oversee Detroit. They oversee Chicago. We see this problem emerging in Toledo, Ohio, and some other places in that state. So there's a federal role in all of this. There is also obviously a role for the Illinois EPA to enforce the laws that are already in place. That doesn't seem to be happening to the extent that we would like to see it, although the notice of violation this week is a good start. And there's a place for the city. Is this the highest and best use of the waterway? We've made a significant investment in the Chicago River and the Calumet River in recent years. The mayor has talked about this as our backyard. Is this the way we want to treat our backyard? We want to dump oil refining waste in it?
It's a good question, and we'll leave it at that. Josh Mogerman, we thank you for joining us. Now for other stories making headlines this week, a once rising star in an Illinois political dynasty checks into federal prison, and a controversial plan to license some drivers. Here's Chris with more.
Thanks, Barbara. Mayor Emanuel is already talking up Hillary Clinton for president, and Derrick Rose hits the hardwood for his first regular season game in more than a year. Another former Illinois politician heads off to the slammer. Jesse Jackson Jr. reported to federal prison to begin serving his sentence several days early.
I just figure he's probably trying to get an early start on that. It makes sense.
Well, I think he's in a lot of turmoil and well-intentioned but misguided.
Undocumented immigrants in Illinois will soon be able to hit the road legally. Secretary of State Jesse White rolled out a new temporary driver's license for visitors, here legally or not.
It made all the sense in the world for us to recognize the fact that as Washington, D.C. deals with the issues of immigration, we here in the state of Illinois have to deal with the safety of our roads.
The first phase of the application process begins in December. Two prominent Illinois politicians say Hillary Clinton is already the front runner in the 2016 presidential race, and recent public opinion polls show her leading all other Democrats.
I think it would be really exciting to have her run. I think it would be even more exciting if she wins because I think it's high time we have a woman president.
I think she'd be a great president, and I really hope she does run, and I hope she gets in.
The most anticipated comeback since Michael Jordan. Derrick Rose returned for his first regular season game.
I'm glad he's back. I think it was the right decision to take a year off, and I hear he's got a better vertical now, so I'm excited for him to be back.
It's going to be a fun season. I think at least we'll have I'm shooting for best record this season.
But the Bulls lost to the reigning NBA champs, the Miami Heat, and Rose finished with only 12 points. And making a full court press on these stories are our guests today, Aaron Del Mar, chairman of the Cook County Republican Party, Ann Kavanaugh, president of Media Pros 24/7, and John Gioccaris, political director for the Chicago Young Republicans. Welcome, everybody. So more twists and turns in the Jackson saga. He shows up for prison early, sends out a press release saying he's in. Oops, not really in. A little too slick here, John?
Yeah, it was confusing as much as it was just disturbing. Particularly, I mean, I look at this from the wider perspective that, ironically, he's going to be serving his term in the same prison where his predecessor, Mel Reynolds, also served his prison sentence. And when you look at the fact that it was well known that he was being investigated by the FBI for all these charges, including campaign fraud, and long before the election, and he still won re-election with, I believe it was 63% of the vote. I mean, ultimately, voters have to hold these corrupt politicians accountable. We can't keep relying on the FBI to do the job.
And he enters prison, and in this press release, they announce who his visitors are going to be, including Louis Farrakhan and Rick Warren, the pastor. Aren't you supposed to check your ego at the door when you go into federal penitentiary?
I don't know. I've done a lot of interviews in the federal prisons, including Betty Lauren Maltese about 4 or 5 times, and people...
Former Cicero president
former
who was
Cicero
convicted
town
of
president who was
charges.
Exactly. And people say it's a country club. It's not. It's hard. As Betty said, every day feels like a year. And you know, we're talking about the high-profile visitors, but I'm thinking of his children. It's very difficult for these kids when they come to the prison. They have to go through the security. They have to be searched. They have to see their parent in prison garb. Despite these high-profile visits and the mess up with the press release when he entered prison, I think he's going to have a tough time, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a cakewalk for him.
But Aaron, the fact that he is inviting these high-profile people, does it sound to you as if they're already thinking about his political rehabilitation?
I think it would be very difficult for him to revive a political career, and even with all the connections and family history that he has. And the basics of it is that he broke the law. He misused his campaign finances, which is a highly regulated thing here in Illinois and across the country. And he was found guilty by a jury of his peers, and now he has to serve the time that he was given. It's unfortunate, you know, that we have this continuation of corruption in Illinois politics, but you know, this is the way it is.
At least he avoided the drama of Governor Blagojevich, former Governor Blagojevich, where the helicopters were following him to the airport and then into the prison in Colorado.
I actually think he was trying to do it right, to go in low-key, to go in a little bit early, but you know, they just found some red tape when they arrived at the prison that they did not expect, because those prisons do have a lot of strict rules. I actually do think he could make a comeback. If he can play this right in prison, if he can do some good in prison like Martha Stewart did, he could emerge okay.
Does he have to be low-key, though? That seems to be a lot of advice from people who have been in prison before, John.
Well, you know, I would hope that he could actually do a lot of good while he was in prison. Ann and I were discussing this earlier, how, you know, I mean, being a very prolific politician and the son of a very prolific leader, hopefully while in prison, perhaps he can, yeah, he can be low-key, but at least use that time to accomplish something productive.
Another item in the legal docket beginning next month. Undocumented workers here in Illinois will be able to apply for driver's licenses for the first time. Is this problematic, Aaron?
I think it is. I think it's a big issue that we're going to have to face. You know, I personally have concerns about creating new laws and opportunities to break the current laws that we already have that are existing. Our immigration laws in the United States and in Illinois are very clean-cut and very specific, and now we're creating laws to skirt around them. And I don't think that's a good policy that we should be implementing.
Well, the Secretary of State says this is going to make the roads safer because it's going to require everybody to have insurance to get a license, whether you're a documented worker or not.
Well, I agree with Jesse White in terms of that, and I think it's probably time for this policy. On the other hand, what I fear is the implementation, because, you know, I went to renew my license a few weeks ago, and there were lines around the block, and it took 3 hours. So when you're going to put 250,000 people that have to go to those DMV offices, I don't know how it's going to work. I like the idea of the policy. I do disagree with you on that, but I just don't know how they're going to be able to implement this. I hope they have a plan, but from what I've seen, waiting in line to get my license or whatever, I think it's going to be a nightmare.
John, do you buy the argument that it will make Illinois roads safer?
Well, as far as I understand how this program is supposed to work, it's entirely voluntary. I mean, you know, current illegal immigrants have to come forward and, one, admit their illegal status, and then two, also purchase the insurance needed to drive. And, you know, if you're relying on that, again, I mean, who knows how many of them can even afford car insurance, let alone will be willing to voluntarily come forward. You know, and what also bothers me about it is the fact that, I mean, yeah, perhaps it could make roads safer, but at the same time, we're breaking some laws to enforce other laws, and, you know, picking and choosing which laws we want to enforce and not want to enforce, that just doesn't sit right.
So you're against this?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem right. So I mean, without knowing more, I'm not even sure how effective it's going to be, because, like I said, it's an entirely voluntary system, and, you know, it's up to them if they're willing to come forward.
Aaron, you're head of the Cook County Republican Party. Can Republicans afford to be seen as anti-immigrant on issues like this, given what happened in the last election?
Well, I think that you know, it's very important, especially in Cook County as well as around the country, that we try to embrace more minorities. I, being a minority myself, I'm very sensitive to that issue. However, it's also important that we have principles that we stand upon, and one of them is following the law. And our laws that have been passed through our legislature and have been signed by our president have very, you know, explicit laws regarding immigration. And currently we're not following them. So asking for illegal immigrants to step forward and to get driver's license and not taking the steps needed to follow the process just seems hypocritical to me.
And should Republicans take another look at this, given their political problems on immigration?
Well, from a strategic viewpoint, I think they should. If they want to attract Latino voters to the party, I think they should. I do think this is a good policy. I'm just worried about the implementation. We could see another Obamacare disaster in Illinois, I think. But overall, I think the policy, it's about time.
And again, just to clarify, I don't hold an anti-immigration stance. I do believe that it would be a good thing to find a pathway to citizenship that doesn't grant total amnesty. I mean, at least there's back taxes involved and whatnot, but legalize them first and then give them licenses, because that's the due order of process.
Also on the political agenda here today, Hillary Clinton, Mayor Emanuel, and Senator Dick Durbin, Democrats, as well as Senator John McCain, Republican, have already proclaimed now in 2013 that Hillary Clinton is the front runner in the next presidential election. Too early for this?
I think it's a train you just can't stop. I was at an event where she spoke in Chicago a few weeks ago, and it was a sellout crowd, and literally every second sentence she uttered, there was a standing ovation. I think Democrats are ready for her, women are ready for her. I even think some moderate Republicans are ready for her. To me, the only thing that could stop Hillary Clinton is a health issue.
We've got some Republicans right here at this table. What do they say about that?
Am I speaking for you?
No, I think it is. I think it's a little early for the nightmare to start now. I think that we've seen a history of this last Democratic president through 2 terms of having failed policies. I'm not very interested in seeing another one continue on with that. I think that we have some strong grassroots Republicans that we're starting to cultivate and develop around the country that'll give her a strong opposition. And I think that when it comes down to it, if we look at the issues, I think that the Republican Party will be successful in the next rotation.
Before we get to those Republican candidates, and we will in just a second, there happens to be a sitting Democratic vice president named Joe Biden. What happened to him, John?
Yeah, well, Joe Biden's, he's always just there. And, anytime he has another soundbite that becomes another YouTube clip, they just say, oh, that's just Joe being Joe. But, no, I don't think, I'm not putting much stock into his candidacy.
So you're more scared of Hillary as a Republican?
Well, I do believe that she has a stronger shot of winning than Biden. And, something I've also noticed after combing through exit poll data in the last election is that people are gravitated towards voting for national icons. When I talk to people on the street who really don't pay much attention to what's going on in Washington or don't care to know, but they voted for Obama, I ask them why, and they just say, well, because he was just so different. Mixed race, single mother. Romney was just another rich white guy. That's like every, president ever. But, people like voting for historical candidates. And, there is an era of energy around Hillary, too. I think you saw it in some of the sound bites that we showed before this segment. And, chances are she'll probably lock the nomination.
So, Aaron, who's the Republican icon?
Well, I think that's really early to tell. I think that we have some strong candidates.
Like who?
Mark Rubio, I think, is a strong candidate. I know he's not as popular in Illinois, but I like Paul Ryan. And I think that we can definitely put a competitor up there. If it comes down to policy, I think that if America is worried about jobs and wants to move our economy forward, a Republican president is the one that's going to be able to get it done.
And you've been watching politics here for a long time. Who do you see on the Republican side emerging? No one's mentioned Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey.
Chris Christie, and there's also Jeb Bush. There's a lot of talk about that. Now, wouldn't that be interesting, a Clinton-Bush rematch again? I think the Republican primary is going to be far more interesting. It's wide open. They do have a lot of good candidates who can make the argument that you're talking about after 8 years of President Obama. So that's going to be the one to watch. I think Hillary's path to the Democratic nomination is pretty well hers.
And if I can add a point, I think the biggest mistake a lot of people can make is that elections are purely ideologically motivated. Something else, another trend I've also noticed that Republicans need to focus on is the fact that over the last 8 years, Democrats have been, combing through blue districts in all the swing states and aggressively marketing their brand into every nook and cranny that's up for grabs in America, and aggressively registering more voters in their column. And they've come to the point now where they've simply out-registered Republicans when it comes to voters. And until Republicans catch up with that, I don't see how 2016 will be any different than 2012.
We have to make a very quick stop at the sports desk. Derek Rose back this week.
Yeah.
What'd you think? Rusty?
You could say that. I mean, only 12 points, that's, a lot of people were saying his comeback was, more hype than Michael Jordan's, although I'm not sure of that. You know, the ratings in the Jordan era was still not as close as where they are now, but they are a little rusty.
On that note, we have to wrap it up and remind everybody that the Chicago Blackhawks are going to be at the White House on Monday. Aaron Del Mar and Kavanaugh and John Giocaris, thanks for your time tonight. And stirring the pot, how one former school teacher found the recipe for life lessons in her cookbook.
A great percentage of kids have a tendency to get into trouble after school because they have nothing to do.
Gloria Hafer is trying to change that. The former Chicago public school teacher is spending her retirement years doing what she loves, cooking and giving teens a chance to avoid getting into trouble.
What I teach is survival cooking. What I want them to be able to do is go home, open the refrigerator, and be able to make a meal for themselves. I learned how to cook out of necessity, okay, because my mom had to become the breadwinner, and I had 3 brothers that needed to be fed. So that's when I decided to get into cooking. I sort of taught myself and got better and better at it. And I swore to myself at that time that I would never have a child on the south side of Chicago that couldn't cook or get a meal for themselves.
While education has always been her main course in life, cooking is her side dish, a passion she shares with students in Chicago's After School Matters program.
After School Matters is a program that was created by the former mayor's wife, Maggie Daly, and it's a program for teens between the ages of 14 to 20. We have 5 content areas that the teens can participate in: sports, arts, communication, technology, and science.
I have a beginning class, apprenticeship culinary, an advanced apprenticeship culinary, and I have over 500 kids waiting to get into the program.
Like those reality TV cooking shows, Gloria's classroom features genuine competition. In this week's challenge, students had to create a full tea time service. The winners treated to experience the real deal at the Drake Hotel on the Magnificent Mile.
We said absolutely, we'd actually like to welcome these kids into our kitchen, give them a tour, meet with some of the culinary staff, talk with the people that they should be talking to if they're really interested in taking this path.
For the tea at the Drake, everybody is going to have to print out a menu, set their table, decorate a hat.
When it comes to the competition, it does get pretty intense, but it's all friendly competition.
Every member of the team, because we do have 4 culinary teams in each class, every member has to have a job assignment, and they have to follow through. The first place team is team number 4. I want Chicago to know that there are great kids out there, and this is a great program. There are kids out there making a difference in their lives, changing their lives, and doing good. And all they want is somebody to care about them.
The morning of the competition, retired Chicago Bear Donnell Wolford joined Gloria and her students in the kitchen. And to see more about his visit, log on to WYCC.org.
That does it for this week's show. You are now in the loop. The conversation with our guests continues right now on WYCC.org. Until next week, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Good night.